All right, everybody. Evening. Tonight is Friday, August 8th, 2025, and this is the countrywide coordinator training with Anna Maria Riezinger. All right, you've got your camera on and you're traveling. Where are you?
No, I'm not traveling home, but I'm at least here. There is that. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for the intro. Thanks for clearing that up for everybody. And we are here. It's August 8th, 2025. Cloudy gray skies in Anchorage, Alaska, and I am on the move. Obviously, we have had a very, very, very busy month since July 8th. And it shows no sign of slowing down or any brief respite in sight. I want people to be aware that July was kind of a water month for many reasons, and August is kind of the last hurrah in terms of claims, counterclaims, and different urgent messages and diplomatic outreaches that need to be made. And so on top of having to care for two men who are in condition where they need extra support and help, we're trying to keep up with the flow of all the different duties and occasions that offer themselves at this time, and also moving our office space, which we have pretty much moved the equipment and everything, and now it's a matter of getting set up again and, kind of eating the elephant. So we are running nonstop, and it's been this way and will be this way. So if you see more of me on the go than you have in the past, that's why. As you know, we have rescheduled this meeting, and it's because we had an urgent kind of a notice at the last moment that there was going to be an announcement regarding the proverbial reset. And my question was, what reset, which reset? And because there have been numerous different things that have been billed as the reset over the years, and it's a tricky word, that little word, it's like of, you have to look really hard at it. And so I wasn't sure who was making any announcements or where it was coming from. So I decided that I was going to attend that particular teleconference last night. And it was a teleconference by Dr. Henderson. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Dr. Henderson and his work, but Dr. Henderson discovered some of the same things that we discovered, and began working at about the same time that we did. It's back, 1998, 99, 2000, somewhere in there, that he actually started bringing lawsuits and making efforts to actually gain some recoupment. Anyway, it was from Dr. Henderson.
We can hear you, Anna, but it seems like you're in a little bit of a spotty situation over there.
In terms of the video, yeah.
That's okay. If you need, if it increases your bandwidth to have your video off for now, that's totally fine.
Okay. Well, anyway, Dr. Henderson pursued his lawsuits all the way up to the World Court. And at the point that he won his case in World Court, he found that the World Court had no enforcement. So he asked them outright, he said, don't you have any means of enforcing your rulings? And they basically admitted that they didn't at that point. And so he went around to the basically the G5 nations and said, hey, we have this court here that has no enforcement. What's the point in having it? And they decided that they would give it military backing. So there are 5 countries that signed up to act as the enforcement for the World Court, which is, of course, an international body. So that's kind of some of the buildup and the background on all this. I actually met Dr. Henderson, it must have been about 10, 12 years ago in Fort Worth, Texas. We had a very amiable meeting. He described to me what he was doing. I described to him what I was doing. At that point, he was putting together a universal court, which would be an ecclesiastical court that, in some respects, would deal with air jurisdiction issues that we more commonly see in the uniform commercial courts, but from an ecclesiastical law standpoint. I believe that I told everybody some years ago that the various forms of corporation which have proliferated over the last few years, such as, for example, foundations, cooperatives, LLCs, C Corps, S Corps, B Corps, all these different forms, business models have been developed by the Roman Curia and the office of the Roman Pontificate and the Pope in his person as Pope, under ecclesiastical law, has the responsibility to basically discipline and, if necessary, liquidate these corporations that have been using that business model that the Roman Curia provided all these years. But the Pope obviously did not discipline and did not liquidate these corporations, which he had in fact created in tandem with the Roman Curia. So as a result of that, things got really out of hand, and we've had all of this quote unquote corporate mischief. I would call it criminality, but I guess in the politesse of the diplomatic realm, they call it mischief. Anyway, so the Pope didn't do his duty. And as a result, we have all this crime and criminality that the corporations, especially the municipal corporations and the British Crown corporations, have engaged in. So this is all background so that you get a good sense of what's gone on. So here we have Dr. Henderson. He's pursued his claims all the way through the World Court. He's gotten enforcement from 5 governments, and then he has made the very arduous effort to get agreement from 198 different governments. Now, of course, some of those governments are the same form of government that has been masquerading as our government. They're corporations in the business of providing government services. They're not the actual governments of these countries. And that is because of many of the same reasons that this situation has gone on in this country, which is, commercial fraud, bad faith, deceit, breach of trust, actions undertaken under color of law, and a whole fusillade of other criminal activities on the part of these for-profit, privately owned corporations that are merely in the business of providing government services under contract. So, as you can see, Dr. Henderson has put in a lot of time and a lot of footwork over the years to garner the kind of world support that he has to enforce the law and to enforce the findings of the World Court. Last night, he announced that all 198 countries are united in supporting enforcement of the World Court findings, and that the only exception is, quote, the United States of America. In the process of his comments, it became very clear that he'd gotten hoodwinked, just like so many others have, and that he was mistaking the British Territorial Corporation, calling itself the United States of America, for America and for the Federation of States. And there were several other things that he was mistaken about, which are common mistakes that we find other countries and other people making. but which we needed desperately to correct, because otherwise our country and our people become the victims in this little game of imposturing and impersonating. So I listened to the teleconference, and then I sat down to my desk late last night, and I wrote an article which has either appeared already or which will appear already, which is addressed directly to Dr. Henderson as an international public notice. And it's a letter of information to Dr. Henderson and the Universal Court that he founded, which is, of course, an ecclesiastical law court, and which supersedes all of the jurisdictions. So basically, I point by point corrected and or offered new information to Dr. Henderson and to the Universal Court, so that they know why they're getting the lack of response from our country that they're getting. They know that they shouldn't be talking to Donald Trump about matters that he knows nothing about and could do nothing about, even if he did know. And just basically kind of clearing the decks so that we can converse with the other nations, and they realize that they're barking up the wrong tree, that they need to be going after the British Crown and the Roman Catholic Church for these situations and circumstances and remunerations. Over the years, since my first meeting with Dr. Henderson, he's apparently brought forward some claims that he is the heir of Jesus Christ, and has, produced some sort of artifacts that had purportedly the blood of Christ on them. This is not the only kind of claim of that sort that exists in the world, and it's not the only claim that's been affirmed. I'm not exactly sure what the details of the evaluation are, if it's a matter of blood type or specific elements of a genome that the church has maintained and kept as a standard of familial claims of those who claim to be related to Jesus. That I cannot tell you. I do know that there are at least 3 individuals that I know of who've gone through this process and been confirmed as relatives of our beloved Rabbi Yehoshua. Anyway, Dr. Henderson is one of those 3. There are other confirmations that lead to your acceptance as a person with standing in the ecclesiastical realm. I have myself gone through that process and have been approved and have standing in the ecclesiastical law courts. Now, it is not something that I am particularly interested in, and it hasn't been something I've inquired deeply into, but it does involve a DNA test. So anyway, these courts are they're extremely high level. They're extremely what can I even describe it as? They are courts that deal in the realm of spirituality, ultimate justice, ultimate secrets, ultimate limitations of the courts. And so it's again like changing from checkers to chess to 3-dimensional chess. It's a different game in each of these venues, whether it's land, sea, or air. And each of these venues has a secular side to it and a sacred side to it. So all of the different courts that you encounter have at least 2 different venues embedded within the court. And so the universal court, being the ecclesiastical court attached to the world courts system, represents the highest ecumenical ecclesiastical court in the world. And the world court then corresponds to the sea court, and it can be invoked to function in the land jurisdiction also. So with all of those things kind of explicitly expressed here, you have a better idea of what all this means. And what my function has been throughout this is to defend America and the American people from being cast as the scapegrace or the scapegoat, whipping boy for the Brits, because they've used us as a storefront for all of their aggression and warmongering and violence and theft and murder and all of the profiteering that they've engaged in, all the privacy violations and all of the trespassing and inland piracy and everything else that they've committed. They've committed this in our name, using the United States of America Incorporated as the vehicle, and they have just conveniently omitted the word incorporated at the end of the name, so that people have been misled in a sort of circumstantial or it's a sin by omission. They've been circumstantially encouraged to think that they were dealing with the actual government of this country, when instead they were dealing merely with a foreign corporation in the business of providing government services under contract that was very, very, very similarly named. If you hear it, there's no difference between the name of our unincorporated Federation of States and their foreign commercial corporation in the business of providing government services. It sounds exactly the same, the United States of America. If they just leave off the word incorporated, there is no way that you can tell the difference using the spoken word. And if you even look at it on paper, it's highly deceptive. If you exclude the word incorporated, it becomes the United States of America with a small t on the word the. The is not included as part of the name of their corporation, but the is included as part of the name of our federation, and it is therefore capitalized when we are talking about the federation. Anyway, it's virtually indistinguishable without having the word incorporated explicitly stated. And that's what their policy has simply been to confuse their operations and their identity with ours, much as a credit card hacker confuses the identity of the card user. They basically steal your identity, then they charge your credit up, and you're left to pay the bill. Well, in this case, these characters have made up corporations, just formed corporations on paper, using very, very similar names to the actual governments of these many countries. Drop the word incorporated so that nobody would be the wiser, and then have impersonated the actual national governments. And they have then availed themselves of bankruptcy protection. After they've charged up the accounts to the full limit possible, they go bankrupt. And when they go bankrupt, two things happen. Their creditors are left in the lurch, and their the people, the underwriters, those who are underwriting the bankrupt entity, the people that ensure the practice of the corporations, are left with the bill. So with one fell swoop, by committing bankruptcy fraud, these corporations have been cheating um, their actual uh, their customers. They've been cheating their customers and all the vendors that have been supplying them with goods and services, who have a ticky with them, who have a tab accumulating with them, who have extended credit. They leave them in the lurch, and they also then bilk the American public because everybody then assumes that their debts are our debts. And that's one of the things I had to explain in the article to Dr. Henderson in the Universal Court, is that no, we are not responsible for the debts of our British territorial subcontractors. The Pope and the British monarch and the British crown are responsible for the debts of their employees that they've allowed to participate in these activities, these criminal activities. So, uh, my part is kind of multiple fold, because I have to make that distinction clear. I have to bring it forward into the public view of the entire world, and I have to uh, defend America and Americans from bearing the debts of these criminals and taking the blame for all of the misery and violence that these criminals have perpetuated on the entire planet for the last 300 years. Otherwise, if I were not standing here and fending this off and explaining it and defending us, then there would be nobody and no voice. It was clear from Dr. Henderson's teleconference last night that he was perplexed. He did not know why there'd been no answer from Donald Trump and from the Americans. He was kind of chalking it up, I think, to just being arrogant and lawless. But it's not that. It's that Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about in terms of the questions that Dr. Henderson is asking him. And Donald Trump doesn't have the information to make a reply to the Universal Court. So we piped up and raised our hands and said, okay, well, that's information that we have, and that's something that we can deal with. And by the way, be aware that there are two entities there calling themselves the United States of America. One is American, one is British. And the British incorporated entity is not able to answer you. They simply don't have the information, and they couldn't make good on anything they promised anyway. So, you need to talk to us, which is, basically what I'm laying out there for everybody. That's what got accomplished last night between, say, 7 o'clock in the evening and midnight. There have been a lot of long hours here, a lot of that kind of diplomatic outreach and diplomatic communication that has been going on over the last several weeks. And it's been in the form of letters, memorandums of understanding, um, notices, and informations. Here's something for all of you to understand and use. Uh, Information has another meaning apart from what we normally, uh, conventionally use. We say, "Oh, I'll give you that information," right? But information has different meaning. In the context of criminality and reporting crimes, information means that you are reporting a crime. Okay. So a letter of information is reporting crimes and misrepresentations and things of that sort before a court. So when you see this international public notice, um, a letter of information for Dr. Henderson and the Universal Court, you'll know that I'm reporting crime, and I'm also I'm responding to misrepresentations that I'm aware of. So you will have a very large well, by my standards, a large article in your mailboxes if you don't already have it. And it describes 30 points of information and contention that are important to our continued peace in this country. Because at this point, we have 198 other countries, some of which are still operating under their natural sovereign governments, some of which are operating under the same kind of criminal usurpation that we have suffered, only from different causes. You know, we wound up in this situation because of deceit and fraud committed during the Civil War era. Other countries have come into this same condition through other scenarios, but nonetheless are suffering the outrages of being represented by a commercial corporation that is merely in the business of providing governmental services of some kind. So I think you're seeing a resurgence of national governments on a worldwide basis. And one of the examples of that is what's happening in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is a largely Muslim country. It's a small country, but it's extremely rich in minerals, especially gold, and it has substantial oil reserves, both. And for many years, the French have been bleeding Burkina Faso dry. They've been they've been mining in Burkina Faso and cheating basically the actual owners of the resources, uh, using payola to pay off officials, using coercion of various kinds, and promoting the continuance, in fact, of a colonialist arrangement even long after colonialism was supposed to be dead and gone. And so Burkina Faso finally told them to shove it, and uh, and took over the gold mines and took over their own oil wells, and started applying their own resources to their own infrastructure needs. And this is being considered as something revolutionary instead of what should have always been. But we need to be aware that there is a large pushback in the rest of the world that is becoming aware of the surreptitious colonialism that the British continued. They pretended to end colonialism, and they pretended to end their part in colonialism and to dissolve the Commonwealth colonial relationships that they had. But in fact, what they actually did is that they changed jurisdictions. And instead of using the Commonwealth relationship as a means to control their colonies, they doubled down and came back in as a military protectorate in territorial jurisdiction. So they simply changed the jurisdiction in which the government was operating and came back in even stronger and used the territorial jurisdiction to impose a military dictatorship type arrangement on all of these other countries, including Australia, Canada, the United States. All of these countries have been suborned under a military dictatorship that was essentially run through the British Crown. And it was a continuance of the British Empire without the British Empire being, you know, named and being recognized for what it was. It was the British Empire simply operating in a different jurisdiction and using different tactics and different forms of law to impose its oppressive and illegal, immoral, unlawful impositions upon the victims of their crimes. And so we've had a real rough go of it, everybody, for a long time. And waking up to this is not pleasant. But essentially, we've had the equivalent of the British Raj established in all of these different countries. You can think of it as the Canadian Raj, the U.S. Raj, the the Mexican Raj, the Libyan Raj, the Iraqi Raj, the German Raj, all of these things have been run exactly as the British Raj in India was done. It's the same exact thing, the same structure, the same military elements, and the same oppressions that have been used, including the fake court system, all of it. It's right down to the nitty gritty. So we can consider that we have been the victims of the Raj here, just as the people of India suffered the Raj for many years in India. And common to the experience of all of this is that they just sneak in the back door and pretend to be somebody else. The way that they have been able to insinuate themselves has been really very educational. They basically establish some sort of relationship, a service provider relationship. And then when the sneaky usurpation happens, they're already in place, and the people accept their presence and assume that they're continuing on in an acceptable role, when in fact they're changing their role without saying anything and taking on a completely more oppressive and lawless character without any notice to anyone at all. Just as Lincoln arbitrarily, uh, with a stroke of his pen, transformed our military into a commercial mercenary force. The same thing was done in other countries. And so you observe the same process. The same thing that was done in India to establish the Raj, which plundered and pillaged all of the Maharajas and all of the kingdoms of India. Um, the same thing was done here. And there's no excuse for it. There was no excuse for it in the 19th century. And there's even less excuse for it now. All the perpetrators did was seek to protect themselves using the corporate veil. And so they were functioning as corporations instead of as governments. But the same net result is still just as criminal. And the corporations, of course, are faithless, lawless, unaccountable things until you strip the corporate veil from them. And then finally, you see who's operating behind this veil, behind this facade of the corporation. And you get down to the nitty gritty of not just prosecuting their executive officers, people like Trump, who for the most part have no ownership interest in the corporation at all, but are just employees, basically, hired guns, who are put in charge of these corporations and told to make a profit. You finally get down to the members of the boards. Who are the board members in the corporate board of directors? Who are the trustees if it's a trust? You don't even know this because it's not obvious, it's not published. Um, for example, the United States of America Incorporated. Who are the board members in charge of this wreck? Who are the owners and actual shareholders that form the Electoral College? In what responsible guise are they functioning? What are they doing? Who are they? By what right and authority are they taking any action whatsoever? So you don't even know who's behind any of it until you strip the corporate veil and you start going after the people that are actually responsible for the mismanagement, malfeasance, and criminal activities of these corporations. So,
Happens at every level. I mean, even down to local municipal city councils. That's not the actual board, you know?
right,
Yeah. So it's everywhere. It's very
right.
pernicious all over the place. Yeah.
It's a cancerous type growth upon the body politic. And it's a horrible crime. It's a terrible thing that they've done. And they've only done it for their own power and their own profit. It's been all about the ability to coerce others and to steal from other people with impunity, hiding behind a facade of justice, embodied in a phony court. The courts were basically changed in the same way that our military was changed into a mercenary force. Our courts were changed into private bill collector agencies. And so the business of the court is to collect money. It really has nothing to do with, take care of him, will you? So just a little interruption there. The courts were changed at the same time as the military was changed, and it was all part of the change in jurisdiction and the change of management that this usurpation allowed. And I know I've upset several people who've complained to me and said, well, how can you compare, how can you say that Donald Trump is a British Crown officer? Well, it's because he is. He's the president of a British Crown corporation called the United States of America Incorporated, which happens to be the very same identical office that Abraham Lincoln occupied when he usurped against our government and created this mess. So, there's no escaping this fact. And whether Mr. Trump is aware of it to the true extent that he needs to be aware of it, I don't know. But I do know that we've told him as much, we've told his followers as much, and we've made a clear distinction that as long as you're functioning as a British Crown officer and operating under the Constitution of the United States of America, then you are not our president. You cannot be recognized as the president of our Federation of States. You cannot be recognized as American. You may have been born in this country, you may have been bred in this country, and you may be a New Yorker, but you are not presently claiming your birthright political status. And so if you're going to adopt the citizenship status of a Brit, you are considered a Brit. And if you are going to adopt the political status of as a member of the Holy Roman Empire, well, then you are a member of the Holy Roman Empire. You're not enabled by some magic to claim your birthright as an American while functioning actively as an employee of these foreign dominions. And so that's what we have here. There haven't been public elections in this country since before Abraham Lincoln. The real breaking point came with Lincoln, but they had been surreptitiously preparing the way to get away for some years. And Lincoln's, put yourself back to 1860, and the elections are coming. There were two elections going on, two election cycles. Now, the actual presidential office for the American federal subcontractor, the States of America subcontractor, and the Constitution that was issued in 1787, the Constitution for the United, small u, States of America, that election cycle took place in March. That's when the president was traditionally inaugurated for the Federal Republic. The British Territorial Corporation, functioning as the United States of America, started holding its presidential election in November with inauguration in January. So their elections took place prior to the Federal Republic elections. All right?
So you're saying
gave,
the Federal Republic had their elections in March?
No. Okay, let's get this completely straight for everybody. The British Territorial Federal Subcontractor arranged to start holding their elections in November with inauguration in January. And that's what you see today, right? But in 1860 and prior, the Federal Republic, the missing Federal Republic, the American federal subcontractor, held its elections in January with inauguration in March. Okay, there were two separate elections going on, and everybody knew it at that point. And what simply happened is that the Brits came in, and they were the only ones with their presidential candidate already inaugurated in January of 1860, or rather 1861. And our presidential elections for the American subcontractor for the Federal Republic would have taken place and would have resulted in our American federal subcontractor, the Federal Republic president, being inaugurated in March. But instead, what happened in March? Well, the states of America could not come to an agreement. The southern states walked out. That left the states of America without a quorum. And so the president could only be installed in absentia after the fact. And Lincoln took full advantage. He declared an emergency. He appointed his cronies to the vacated southern congressional delegation seats. He pretty much handpicked the members of Congress and proceeded to lead this country into a devastating war that was a war by any other name but a mercenary conflict in truth. So basically, the British Crown came in here, created an incitement over the issue of slavery, and their actual goal was not anything concerning slavery. And Lincoln actually admitted this on numerous occasions. He was very forthright about the fact that none of this had anything to do with the issue of slavery. And so far as he was concerned, that wasn't a fight he wanted to contend about. It was not the real issue. Never was. And yet, according to the propaganda, you would think that this was entirely about slavery. Well, Lincoln said it wasn't, and he was telling the truth for once. That's what part of what's so irritating. People think that the Civil War was about the institution of slavery and getting rid of it, an evil in our midst, when in fact it was not about slavery. It was about cotton, and it was about the price advantage that plantation slavery gave to American cotton in the burgeoning textile industry in Europe. The British Parliament had invested heavily in producing cotton in Egypt. You've heard about Egyptian cotton. Well, the British Parliament invested in Egypt and in Egyptian cotton, and they found out that because of the vagaries of the Nile and various other things, it wasn't as cheap to produce Egyptian cotton as they thought it would be. And one of the reasons was that the Egyptian workers had to be paid, and the American plantation workers were basically working for board and room. And so the price advantage of American cotton was killing the investment potential of Egyptian cotton, and that's what sparked the entire thing. It was a competition, a commercial competition. So the roots of the Civil War, the reasons for it, the personalities and powers and parties that were involved in it, it was all obscured. It was all meant to appear to be a social struggle over the issue of slavery. We can guarantee you that it was not about slavery, not only because Abraham Lincoln admitted that it wasn't, not only because we know about the ulterior motives of the British Parliament trying to undermine the American cotton supply in the marketplace, but also because as soon as they got this thing wound down so that there were not open hostilities in the streets, they took action to bring in another doppelganger corporation, merely calling itself with a capital T this time, United States of America, and again, deleting the word incorporated from the name. They brought in another ringer, another corporation to impersonate us, and this time in 1868, it was a Scottish commercial corporation, and its registration is still standing on the books, plain as day, in Scotland to this day. And they then started the business of issuing a corporate constitution. This was a charter for this 1868 doppelganger. Uh, it looks very similar to the Constitution of the United States of America that the British territorial contractors always were operating on. Uh, but there are some very slight differences, and it was the charter of a corporation instead of a service contract. And so as a result, they were able to make changes to it as bylaw amendments instead of amendments that had to be ratified by the states. And so they created a bylaw amendment, simply called it an amendment. It was never ratified by any of the, it was never ratified by a majority of the states of the Union. And they slipped in this 14th Amendment right after the 13th Amendment that they made and accepted to this corporate charter. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, and then the 14th Amendment redefined slavery and made it a permanent institution, along with foisting off conferred citizenship obligations, what's known as 14th Amendment citizenship, okay, which we now know as citizen of the United States with a small c, okay? So they created this whole new citizenship obligation and they foisted it off on the plantation slaves. Well, I should say the newly freed plantation slaves. The excuse they gave for this was that certain states of the Union were refusing to accept Black people as members of the population, the state population. We're treating them as foreigners. That may or may not be true. We have been unable to find any significant evidence of that in any of our research. It looks to us like a red herring issue that was just merely used as an excuse, some sort of theoretical concern on the part of the Congress. But anyway, they were claiming that the freed plantation slaves were left stateless by their freedom and that they were not being accepted as state nationals. And then they created this phony municipal citizenship to basically re-enslave them and obligate them to pay the debts of the United States of America Incorporated. And so anytime that you have any kind of law that obligates people's labor, you're dealing in peonage or enslavement of some kind. And yet we've grown up accepting this as if it were natural and normal and as if this were okay. It's not. Peonage and slavery have both been outlawed since 1926 worldwide, and yet we've had a majority of the Western European and certainly the United States and the former Commonwealth countries have been using their own populations like slaves or indentured servants, and it was just a matter of which category you happened to fall into. If you were in the military, you were an indentured servant serving a tour of duty. If you were a federal civil servant, you were a citizen of the United States and you were considered a slave to the Pope. And that's the way things were in Europe, and that's the same system that they attempted to inculcate here under a guise of secrecy and deceit. Nothing more or less. Just keeping everything under wraps and counting on the fact that the Americans wouldn't recognize, wouldn't know what they were doing. Well, eventually we woke up and researched it and discovered the trail, and we then knew what we were dealing with, which was a rather unnerving experience, I can tell you. But nonetheless, it came full circle, and we recognized the old evil in new clothes, or as we might say, hiding behind a new mask and a new jurisdiction and a different set of laws. Uh, this has now been torn wide open. It is being talked about from here to Bangkok and back, and people are on the move and not about to put up with it. And they're viewing it through the lens of the pandemic and all of the miseries that have accompanied it. And one of the chief movers at this point is the government of the Netherlands, which ironically was involved in this, um, all of this at a fairly high level. Um, the uh, the problem is that when the guilty nations are caught, they are most um, they're the ones that scream loudest. And the government of the Netherlands is now coming forward and doing things like it most recently recognized that Israel is a terrorist nation because of the genocide in Gaza. Well, we feel very good about that. We feel that yes, any responsible government should decry the genocide of an innocent civilian population, and that we are morally and legally and lawfully and ethically obligated to object to it, to Mr. Netanyahu and his entire cabinet and everybody concerned. Okay? Um, so the government of the Netherlands has done that. They've declared Israel a terrorist organization. They're also in the primary fight with the pandemic. They're making correction, is what's happening, and the the Dutch courts, their district courts, they have district courts just as we do because they've been under military obligation and military occupation, illegal as hell, but they have been since the Second World War. So now some of the chief prosecutions related to the pandemic are now taking place in the Netherlands or in Belgium and the Low Countries of Europe. So they are pursuing it in the district court in the Dutch courts and bringing charges against Bill Gates and Albert Bourla and some of these other monsters that are responsible for the pandemic and the entire genocide related to the pandemic. You're going to see a lot more action of that kind. You're going to see basically people in other countries crying for the blood of these American billionaires who have done this for murder and profit. And they need to be arrested, they need to be charged, they need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And if they're found to be criminally insane, which I'm not confused, I'm convinced that several of them are, Bill Gates and Albert Bourla among them, um, then they need to be put in a nice padded cell. And if they're not criminally insane, then they need to be hung. And it's as plain and as sure and as straightforward as that. 100 years ago, if somebody stole your cattle and tried to rebrand them and you caught them at it, you didn't have to go to the law. You didn't have to have a prolonged business about it. You just strung them up from the nearest tree, and there's the evidence, and away we go. Well, that's American justice. That's law of the land. And as we have a land jurisdiction government in full operation, there's really no reason that we're sitting here with our thumbs up our butts, waiting for the criminals to prosecute themselves. That's not going to happen. The criminals are not going to prosecute themselves. They're going to try to excuse what they've done. They're going to try to reduce their liability for what they've done. They're going to uh, pretend they didn't know, and a great many of them didn't. But those that did know will still try to pretend that they didn't know. In any event, they're not going to prosecute themselves. And so it behooves us as state assemblies to get our act in gear and stop playing at what we're doing. A lot of the correspondence that I get from state assemblies is the most trivial bull I've ever heard from any group of people. Here we are in the midst of a major worldwide crime event and dealing with things of genocides, of the kind that you're seeing in Ukraine, the kind that you're seeing in Gaza, the kind that you're seeing through the pandemic. These people are trying to murder us on a vast scale. And what I get back from the assemblies far too often are concerns about, are we using the right color of ink? What's the proper name for this office? And most of it is already explained in articles that are available at www.annavonrights.com, which has a search engine and which anyone can use. So, instead of paying attention to the severity and urgency and importance of what we're doing, we're somehow lollygagging around as if this were, I don't know, an exercise of some kind, that we're just going to lollygag and not actually put pedal to the metal. We have to take a different mindset here and realize that if these criminals are to be prosecuted, it's our responsibility to man up, get organized, get our government in gear, and do it as quickly, as properly, and as effectively as possible. Not only for our own sake, because we're victims along with everybody else, but because we owe a debt, an obligation, a liability to the rest of the world. They've been harmed by mercenaries from America. And whether or not those people knew they were mercenaries is kind of being obscured by the fact that they were mercenaries and they came in, they murdered entire villages for no apparent reason. Look at what happened in Libya. They just went in there and mowed people down. Little kids, women with babies in their arms. And for what? Because Muammar Gaddafi had the outrageous whatever, he affronted the Queen by suggesting that Africa should make use of its own gold and have a unified gold currency that the quote unquote African Union could use to trade. He was proposing that the African nations do the same thing that our states did in 1776 and issue a unified currency, just like we issued the United States dollar. He was proposing that the African nations bond together in a union and issue a unified African gold currency. And because he had the audacity to do this, the unmitigated gall to raise his hand and suggest that the African nations should use their own gold for their own currency, the banks and the British Crown killed him, murdered him. It may be of interest to Americans to know that Libya was among the Arab countries progressive and fairly well advanced because they were spending their money on their own people. Young couples in Libya were given a stipend sufficient to buy get a house, start out a life with a home. Students were given free tuition. Elders were given support. They were given monthly payments to help them survive. Libya was adding on to its infrastructure. They were making good progress, and the people there loved Muammar Gaddafi for the most part because he was reinvesting Libyan resources in Libya, which, of course, the old fat cats sitting in their clubs in London could not abide. So look at what we did. we were misled again, in the same way as George W. Bush and his outrageous weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. We were lied to, and we were used as cheap mercenaries to go in and commit murder, unknowingly, but nonetheless to commit murder and to wipe out not only Gaddafi, but a great many Libyans, together with their infrastructure and their villages and their towns. So much for the pride of the United States, and so much for our poor guys in the military, because they didn't even know that they were being used as commercial mercenaries. As I've often said, if they had known that, they simply wouldn't have been working for peanuts. They wouldn't have to go and get food stamps in order to feed their families. They would have just walked down the street to BlackRock and gotten $250,000 plus all sorts of insurances and benefits, instead of taking the COLA corrected earnings of a Air Force first airman, which hadn't been changed since 1962. I have some other information for you to think about tonight. If you were to do the corrections for all of the adjustments that have occurred because of inflation since the 1960s to today, the hourly wage would be something like $66 an hour, just to maintain our basic standard of living. We would have had to pay those people that are working at McDonald's and Burger King and flipping burgers for us. They would be earning $66 an hour. And you can do the math to figure out how much more you would have to be paying professionals and people that were skilled mechanics and so on. It would be astronomical. We would be paying, well, 100 times what we're paying now. Okay? And that's why our standard of living, and that's why our infrastructure and everything else has gone downhill, because the fat cats have been taking off that profit, and they've been profiting themselves off the labor of others. And they've been unjustly profiting themselves by letting banks, private banks, uh, charge people for contracts they never agreed to, and foisting off the Queen's debts on Americans right, left, and center the past 150 years. They've gotten away with it because, as con men, they were simply that good, and they were able to maintain secrecy because it was treason and they knew their necks would stretch for it. And that's really simply what's happened. Now, we have to do what we have to do, and that is to restore our lawful government, restore our lawful courts, invoke American common law, invoke American admiralty, and get moving. Now, I may have been able to keep the sword of Damocles a few inches above our heads by making it clear to the rest of the world that we're not the United States of America Incorporated, that we've been victims too, and that we never had anything to do with this on any knowing basis. However, I think it's important for everybody on this call tonight to know that as far as the rest of the 198 nations of the world are concerned, we're the bad guys. They think that America and Americans are responsible for all of this.
Yeah, which we're not, but
Right. So just consider yourself in the crosshairs and get moving out there, folks. Start taking this seriously. Start studying. Stop arguing. Start fighting among yourselves. Stop gossiping about each other. And that's what I've got to say to all the coordinators in training tonight. This is important. It has to go forward. You can't fool around. Okay? And for that, I'm sorry, but I have to take off right now. I cannot continue on right now. I have to answer some other things that have come up. But this is perhaps the most serious and most motivational speech I've given in a long time. Okay? What I saw last night was a serious lack of understanding on the part of some key people, and I saw a significant hatred being expressed against this country and its people that they don't deserve. And we're going to have to step up and do our part to bring an end to this farce.
Well, thank you, Anna. Well, thank you for correcting this Dr. Henderson and for course correcting the record. I think that, you know, what you were a witness to with that group not fully comprehending what's really going on and who Americans really are, as opposed to these British territorials and papist municipals that we've got among us that have been running amok, you know, harming people all over the world. I think that's the exact same issue that we're having locally on our own assemblies and, you know, even in our own families when people can't grasp exactly what it is that we have to do. So you're right. We have to step up our game into, I mean, this isn't a game. We need to step up our education efforts and make sure that we're very, very clear about our jurisdiction and the job that we have to get done, which is stand up our states and all the 4 pillars, and then turn our focus to the counties and stand up the counties. And we all the while have to keep our subcontractors noticed with clear directions of what we want them to stop doing and what we want them to start doing. Even if we're not fully standing, we need to communicate with these people.
Each one of the states is now in what's called general session. And in general session, you can take a vote like we've done with roll call votes, as we've done that before. You can do roll call votes and those votes count. Okay, so you are partially enabled. You are partially there already. And to the extent of being able to conduct basic business on a one-by-one basis, you are already there. But we need to get the rest of the way and stop this business of, you know, constantly 1 step forward, 2 steps back. If you've got people in your assembly who are causing disruptions and petty gossip and doing other things like that, take them aside and say, look, you're doing this. It's causing disruption. It's, you know, distracting people from our actual work to be done here, and we can't have that. So we're giving you a 1-week timeout to think about what's important. And if they do it again, 2 weeks timeout. If they do it again, a month timeout. If they do it again, 3 months timeout. They do it again, 6 months timeout. If they do it again, a year timeout. Okay, you see how this has to be done. They have to be informed each time what they're doing wrong, why it is harming the assembly's functions, and then they need to be punished for it. You can't just let these guys run rampant and come in here and lather their mouths and act as armchair quarterbacks over every little thing and gossip and cause all sorts of disruption and despair and whatever. You know, we can't be doing this. We have to keep our eyes on the prize. We have to keep moving, and we have to get this job done. So every state of the union is on notice that this is not a practice drill. This is the real deal. And you're the only ones that are here to do it. So one way or another, you have got to educate others. You've got to do the outreach. And you've got to get organized. Okay? There's just no other way around it. Recently, I was informed, much to my horror, that there are groups around this country who think that by keeping their assembly very small, they can control more and have more power. And even people who think that a group of, you know, 6 little old ladies are going to control the state trusts of entire states of the Union. I have to tell you all that that is not true. And it won't be allowed, and you won't get anywhere doing anything to keep other Americans out. You have to bring more Americans in. So, you know, there's no advantage. You're not going to get more of the pie by having fewer members, all right? It's not working that way. It does not work that way. So just get yourselves motivated in an unselfish way to help your neighbors and yourself and your country.
All right, that's a clear directive. I think
Right.
everybody's hearing this, right, guys? Thumbs up.
All right. Well, that's about all I've got for now. I have to go toddling off and get home and do some more work. And I don't have forever to do it, and I don't have unlimited amounts of energy or presence of mind that I can bring to bear every night at 3 a.m., as Shannon says. So I'm going to cut it off there. And if you have questions, please put it under just put the name of your state as the subject line. And I will flag it as a question from one of the coordinator trainees. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Take care, guys.
Love you.
God bless
Bye.
everybody.
God
Good
bless
night.
you.
Thanks. Night.
I guess.
From
Love you. Good day.
Mississippi.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Anna. Have a great night. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Good night, Michelle. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle, for your work. Much appreciated.
Yes, that was
Thank
great.
you.